this, that, the first time a mother carries a son, that son is carrying some genes that her immune system has never seen before. All the genes on the Y chromosome, there's no way her immune system could have seen it. And as long as that first son is in utero, her immune system never sees it. But inevitably at birth, whether it's cesarean section or vaginal delivery, there's always blood and there's always mixing of blood. And so at that point, the mother's immune system is going to see these male-specific antigens that it's never seen before. Of course, it's going to regard it as an invader, and it's going to start making antibodies to it. So their hypothesis is that each time a woman delivers another son, her immune system is going to generate more of these antibodies. And if she has a subsequent son, antibodies cross the placenta just fine. And so, in fact, the placenta very actively sends antibodies across to protect the young. And so that would mean that her antibodies are going into this third son and somehow altering the development of their brain. And the strong evidence they found in favor of this is that in women who have sons where there's this pattern that looks like that might have happened, it turns out they have higher levels than control mothers of antibodies to a male-specific antigen, quite specifically, an antigen to a protein called neuroligin 4Y. So
cell adhesion molecule.
Exactly. You know that neuroligands are important for synapse formation. And it turns out there's several copies, not unusual in humans. And this one, neuroligin 4, there's one on the X chromosome and one on the Y chromosome, and they're slightly different. And so the fact that these mothers are making antibodies to this male-specific antigen, and that in their particular family, it looks like subsequent sons were more likely to be gay, you can imagine that's what's going on, that her immune system has perturbed the development of that subsequent son enough that when they grow up, they're more likely to be gay. Whatever the mechanism is, it has to be that it's the mother's body that is remembering how many sons she's carried before them, right? And it's got to be the mother's body that somehow is doing something to perturb the development of her subsequent sons to make them more likely to be gay. It's a fascinating idea, and it also gets at that same theme that I mentioned before. There are lots of different developmental pathways to end up being gay or to end up being straight. And there isn't going to be one cause of anything in human behavior, and certainly not of sexual orientation. But I think the evidence is looking pretty strong that for women at least, prenatal testosterone does have a say, and we know that in men, the mother's body has a say in whether they're going to be gay or straight when they grow up.
The result is so cool because once again, it spits in the face of these like kind of reflexive assumptions. For instance, you could imagine, and I probably grew up hearing like, oh, he was raised around a lot of girls or something, had a lot of sisters, or he had an older sister or three, right? Or dad left the house, this didn't happen so much in the 70s and 80s, but it was more frequent in the 90s. Back then it was called broken homes. Now people will be like, what are you talking about? Like, everyone knows somebody divorced, right? So, but back then it was more rare, and there was this idea like lack of male influence. And of course, there are important, I believe, gender-specific influences on kids in terms of upbringing, but in terms of the stereotype that seems to have largely dissipated, but that, like having an older sister or three would make a son more likely to be gay. It's exactly the opposite when you look at the biology.
Yeah, I mean, Ray's looked at that very carefully. And so older sisters don't matter. And neither do younger sisters. And here's the other thing, that younger brothers don't matter, right? So no matter how many younger brothers you have, that doesn't change your odds of being gay when you grow up. So that's why I say it's got to be the mother's body that is remembering, and it doesn't seem to be socially mediated. It is, independent of that. It is nature having its say.
Males with congenital adrenal hyperplasia. We didn't talk about that. And perhaps more important is to talk about males and females with congenital adrenal hyperplasia but are heterozygous. So they have one functional copy, one non-functional copy. And the reason I raise this is that it's very common. It's 1 in 12.
Huh. I didn't
1
know.
in 12. which seems like an outrageously high number, but it's one of the things that is immediately screened for, maybe not as much as some other, blood-related diseases and things like that.
No, I didn't know that, but I can see. I mean, you have to remember. Actually, there are several different genetic mutations along the pathway of making adrenal steroids that can go wrong, and so there are several steps that have to be there for them to make adrenal steroids. So number one, there's more than one site where the mutations would be carried, and of course, the heterozygotes may have no symptoms whatsoever, and so they may reproduce just fine.
We know this,
Yes.
that sorry, I should be clear because people are probably thinking, wow, 1 in 12. Both males and females that carry one mutant copy of CAH are capable of healthy reproduction. There are some hypomorphic phenotypes. Some people make more androgens. Some people have a sustained stress response. It's not very well studied, but it is very common, which I found interesting.
Another reason why the carriers are so common is because typically there's no phenotype, or if there is, it's subtle, and so it doesn't come to the attention of any physicians. It's only when two defective copies of the gene come together in one offspring that there's no adrenal steroid production at all, and then things happen enough to get the attention of the doctors.
Yeah, I've looked into this, and it does seem like one mutant copy of CAH is you find it just statistically more frequent in professions or sports where there's a requirement for long duration stress tolerance, which makes sense, right? I mean, so some of these genes could confer an advantage, some could confer a disadvantage in different settings.
And that there might be a heterozygote advantage. I mean, the classic example of sickle cell anemia, right, where being a heterozygote for that gene confers an advantage. If there's malaria in the area, you'll be less likely to succumb. Things go wrong when two copies come together in one individual, and that's when the blood cells are especially affected. And things go wrong when an offspring gets two such copies, and which is relatively rare, but it does happen. And in that case, then the offspring is very sick.
Did you ever do the head transplantation experiment on the finches?
That's amazing what sort of a memory you have. No, I never did.
You want to explain what this was? Because I'm not going to do it correctly, but I remember you wanted to do an experiment where you were going to transplant finch heads.
Well,
and I thought it was the coolest experiment ever because it was going to be done as embryos. So no, it was not taking heads off of birds.
Yeah.
It was an embryo experiment, but I think we should talk about the backdrop of this. Male birds of certain species sing, female birds don't.
Right.
So you wanted to embryonically put a female head on a male body, a male finch head on a female body, and you wanted to swap head bodies of these embryos. Tell us the experiment, Mark.
I'm certainly looking like the mad scientist.
Let me tell you, wait, hold on. Crazier things have been done with U.S. tax dollars, like rainbow mice that glow, 215 different fluorescent colors to identify different cell types. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I think this experiment has a purpose to get at a principle that can't be understood any other way. So it's not just tinkering for the sake of tinkering.
In fact, people do those sorts of transplants in birds. So a very famous neuroscientist from France, Nicole Duran, did these experiments where she would open up chick embryos and quail embryos, and she could scoop out part of the nervous system from one and implant it in the other. And she'd know when she had done it right, that she had a way of telling the cells apart under a microscope. Plus, when they grew up, here you'd have this white leghorn chicken with a streak of brown feathers right where she
Was it called a quicken?
But
Sorry, couldn't help myself.
Here you'd have this white leghorn chicken with a streak of brown feathers in the middle that were derived from the quail. And so it is possible to do those sorts of swaps. And of course, this is what's so great about working with birds is their embryos are, easy to get to for the first 21 days or so. So people have done those sorts of experiments. There was a question about sexual differentiation of the brain in birds because and I'll tell you why it turned out I didn't need to do that experiment and it wouldn't have shown what we wanted. That is, so there are sometimes you'll see in the news, someone will find a gynandromorph. in birds. Yep.
Gynandromorph.
Gynandromorph. So half female, gyn, and half male, andro. And when it happens in cardinals, for example, it's like the animal's been split down the middle.
No.
Yes, where the one side is the bright red of a male with a crest, etc., and the other side isn't, right? So these occur occasionally. And our best understanding of what happened there, first of all, the sex chromosome is a little different in birds and mammals. I'm going to gloss over that. But our best understanding of what happened there is this is a case where two embryos, one that was carrying male sex chromosomes and the other female sex chromosomes, came together at an early stage. And so what we have is a mosaic animal where one side is genetically male and the other side is genetically female. Now, in a mammal, if that happened, the testis on the male side would masculinize everything by using hormones. The clue that something else is going on in birds is that in this case, there's not been this blending. And when Art Arnold and others looked at the brains of gynandromorphs, sure enough, the sex differences where this region, HVC, for example, tends to be larger in males and in females. In these animals, it was larger on one side of the body than on the other. So they were indeed, split. Well, this suggested that gonadal hormones were not in charge of sexual differentiation. And so what I wanted to do, and never figured out quite how to do, was to take a male brain and put it on a female body and vice versa, to ask what sexual differentiation will be like. Will the whole body listen to the brain and become male?